Has debate jargon become too much of a chore? Does every round you enter leave you wanting to know more? Well, look no further because one clap is the key. It's time for Professor Graham and Kevin's ABCs. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. Oh, God. Hello, debaters. Welcome back to another episode of Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. I'm Professor Graham, here with my pal Kevin, and today the word of the day is going to be research. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Okay, let's start with some basic terminology. When we do research, we're trying to do two things: get background information about the topic and hunt for cards/evidence. Card is just another term for evidence that happens to be fewer syllables. However, it also has a very jargony feel to it, so saying it en round to an inexperienced judge probably just adds to the confusion. A long time ago, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, debate used to be 100% on paper as opposed to today, where most debating occurs on laptops, or at least on Word documents. Evidence used to be little news clippings attached to things like note cards. Thus, when you were reading or asked to call upon a particular piece of evidence, you would quite literally pull out a card. And ever since then, the term is just sort of stuck. Alright, listen up, you chumps. If you don't already know, using a search engine isn't like how your grandma uses one. You don't just look up, "Does economic collapse cause the nuclear apocalypse?" in Google and hope for the best. This isn't kindergarten anymore. You gotta learn how the technology actually works to make the most out of it. So, the first place to start is, what are you using to search for things? While I don't think there's necessarily a better search engine to use, I do think there are some websites that you need to know about. For example, Google Scholar is a free-to-use search engine that only returns journal articles, books, and law reviews instead of thousands of useless sources from normal Google that they dredge up. This particularly provides completely free access to journal articles and books that are normally locked behind paywalls, just by clicking the link on the left here. Another vitally important thing is learning how to use Boolean operators. Don't click off the video, I'd swear they're not complicated, and if you already know what they are or how to use them, then maybe public school is working. Regardless, Boolean operators refer to things like and, or, and not, which produce specific searches for your results. And is for when you only want articles that use both terms. For example, if I'm looking for articles about environmental collapse in the Gulf of Mexico, I would probably do searches for eutrophication and Gulf of Mexico. Now, only search results that exactly contain the words eutrophication and the Gulf of Mexico will pop up. Quotation marks indicate that I'm looking for that exact term. So if the article does not have exactly the words eutrophication and the Gulf of Mexico, it won't even pop up in my search results. But I left the word environmental collapse out of quotations because I'm trying to direct the search towards articles about the environment. But I doubt the articles that I'm looking for are going to use the exact phrasing of environmental collapse. One more example. If I'm looking for articles that talk about proliferation of nuclear weapons, either in South Korea or Japan, then when I'm doing my Google search, I should do something like Japan or South Korea nuclear proliferation. Now, any articles that talk about either Japan or South Korea nuclear proliferation will pop up. Using the word "or" will always give me more search results because it will turn up any articles about either country getting nuclear weapons. But if I use the word "and" instead, it would only return results where it talks about both Japan and South Korea in the same article. Now that we know how to look for things, it's time to ask ourselves an important question. What kind of research am I doing? If it's early in the topic's life cycle, you're probably doing mostly survey research, where you're probably just looking up terms of art from the resolution, or you're going down the strangest rabbit holes you can find about things that interest you. Is your topic about whether civil disobedience is good or bad? Then you should probably start by learning what civil disobedience is before you go on your specific card hunts. This period of research is nebulous. It doesn't really end because there are going to be times late in the topic where you need to go back to the drawing board to go find more things. The goal of all of this is to find out more about the topic as a whole, but along the way, we should be collecting and bookmarking important websites, books, and journal articles that we think will be useful later. You should keep a list, not only of the important hyperlinks that you find, but also important search terms that produce the best results for you finding future cards. For example, when I'm looking for impact defense evidence to disprove my opponent's impact scenarios, I usually look up the impact and in the same search bar, add in words like hype, overhyped, unlikely, disprove, etc. This way, if I find any articles about that subject, the authors are already probably making claims like nuclear war is overhyped and here's why. Now I've got both some cards and potential jumping off points if I ever need more like it. Now, the second you find an argument that you like, or enough arguments that you'd like to investigate further, that brings us to the other kind of research, and I'm going to call it direct research. Direct research is where you do searches for specific arguments that you would like to craft. Let's take one of LD's resolutions from last year about China balancing its economic growth versus its environmental protection. At this point, let's assume we've already done some topic research and we're getting ready to start writing a contention about why environmental protection is good. One of the scenarios I found in my topic research was inspired by this article. It was an attention trade-off argument that China focusing on environmental protection meant that they could not invest in their military, which made a confrontation in the South China Sea over Taiwan more likely. Now that I've found some articles, the rest of this process is just fleshing out the entire argument with more cards and answers to arguments that I suspect will be prominent in the future. I'll want uniqueness cards that talk about how a war is likely now, more link evidence that says that a trade-off argument is real, and some impact cards that talk about what happens if there ever is a conflict over Taiwan. I'll just keep refining my searches as I look for these specific arguments and make my file look more fleshed out. That brings us to the last part of this video, how to cut a card. Cutting a card is a simple but sometimes monotonous task. First and foremost, I would recommend installing a program called Verbatim on your computer. Verbatim is a macro in Word that adds an entirely new tab to all of your Word documents that is made by debaters for debaters to use. It's not just useful for cutting cards. It includes a timer, makes file organization easier, and a ton of other irrelevant things to this video. If nothing else, the little shortcuts for underlining, highlighting, tagging, and shrinking cards is useful enough for me. Personally, I'd recommend downloading version 5.0 from the website. It's an older version, but antivirus software is not particularly fond of the newest updates. If you're a Google Docs user, first off, I'm sorry for your loss. However, there is still a substitute. In the Chrome store, there's an add-on for Google Docs that lets you do most of the features Verbatim allows you to do. It's just a little more effort. I wasn't able to find it in the Chrome store, but I do have a stable hyperlink for downloading it, and I'll pop it in the description of the video. I'd also recommend getting Site Creator, which is a Google/Firefox extension that pre-makes a lot of your citations whenever you go onto a website. If you have your own way of citing cards, that's great, but this one is literally a free template and it works wonders. Just go check out the extension store in your browser and it should have one. Now, actually cutting the cards. I like to follow a little flowchart when I cut cards. Step 1. Copy and paste the portions of the article that you would like to have into Word. You should copy over entire paragraphs, but you're not obligated to copy the entire article. You must maintain paragraph integrity, showing where paragraphs begin and end. Step 2. Underline the portions of the card you think are useful. This should include things that you plan on directly reading, but should also include important arguments that you think are useful for understanding the context of your card. This means by the end of the process, what you highlight should be less than what you underlined. Step 3. Boxing and bolding. I've gone into my settings to make it so whenever I use the emphasis tag in verbatim, that I box important warrants for lines from the card. This is to indicate to those who read my card that this is both a place to make sure that you're reading intelligibly so that the judge can hear the argument, but also so that you know exactly where the actual arguments are in the card. If you get asked a question in CX or you're extrapolating warrants for the final rebuttals, knowing exactly where arguments are in cards is really useful, so use boxes and bolding well. Step 4. Highlight. At this point, the goal is to make the most readable version of that card possible. It should be both brutally efficient while also perfectly articulating your argument. Cards should not take you 2 minutes to read, but they also shouldn't be 2 seconds long either, barring some T definitions. When I say brutal efficiency, I mean it. If there is a word that is not necessary for understanding a sentence or making it cohesive, then chop it. It shouldn't sound like word salad when you read, but it should be as little reading as necessary. Step 5. Tag it. Now that you've cut the card and know what argument it makes, give it a proper tag. The goal should be to describe the basic argument and then provide warrants to the side. So, if I had this card, I would tag it, "Climate change is disastrous. Tipping points and inaction cause environmental collapse." It's simple, and it makes all the arguments that I want that I have had in the card. And congratulations. Now you've learned how to do research and cut a card. Doing this is an essential part of doing well in debate. You need to know your stuff, and the best way to win arguments is to know the arguments because you did the work yourself. So work hard, press on, and good luck out there. Whew, that was a long one. I think I'm gonna need a break. What do you think, man? After? Hey, thanks again for watching today's episode of Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. As always, I'm Professor Graham, and that's my pal Kevin. If you ever need any help with debate stuff at all, my email should be right up here. Just make sure you CC your coach. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can with any debate tips that you might need. I'll drop that knowledge on you. Bam. Thanks for watching. It's been a pleasure. See y'all later.